The other day I was taking a look through this thrift book website where you can purchase used books, and I came across some hamster care books that I thought would be interesting to go through, including this one, which is Hamsters, A Complete Introduction. This is by Mervyn F. Roberts, and this book was published in 1987. So I thought it would be very interesting to go through this and just look at what care was recommended back then in the 80s and how many myths we can spot. It's funny to even think that this care book was literally published before Roborowski dwarf hamsters were even domesticated yet. So this book is completely in color. There's actually a lot of photos in this book. A lot of them are going to be questionable. It was the 80s, so just remember that. Hamster care definitely was not at its peak time. In the book, it starts off with hamsters in general, and one thing I want to note is that when they're talking about hamsters, they really just mean Syrian hamsters. I'm assuming because at the time, dwarf hamsters definitely were not as common, same with Chinese hamsters. So when they talk about hamsters, they literally just mean Syrian hamsters. So the first couple of pages are, fine. It's just talking about, Syrian hamsters in general. And then they move on to why have a hamster as a pet? Hamsters are small animals, which means that they can be comfortable in relatively small quarters. There is myth number one. And yes, it started all the way back at the beginning. Thankfully, this sentence is becoming less and less popular for people to say, but there are still quite a few people out there that believe that small animals should be able to live in just small enclosures due to their size. Then on the next page, there is a dwarf hamster next to a Syrian hamster. I guess they were trying to show the size difference. I don't know why they really had to do that because they literally barely mention dwarfs in this book anyways. Then we move on to them saying their lifespan is about 1,000 days maximum. Maximum. So 1,000 days is about 2.7 years. And then they go, so if you get tired of keeping hamsters, just stop breeding them, and in less than 3 years, you will be free. For one, why are they just assuming that everyone is just breeding hamsters? I mean, I think back then when hamsters started becoming popular as a pet, I think a lot of people were trying to breed them and jump on like the trend of hamsters as pets. Then they kind of move on to how to choose a hamster. So they're talking about like which age and which sex that you should get. And then they move on to appearance where they say, your hamster should weigh 54 grams or more, which is like a very specific number. And the fact that they're not really mentioning dwarf hamsters in this book, they're more so talking about Syrian hamsters. Your Syrian hamster should literally never weigh 54 grams as an adult, unless they have health conditions. But if they do, they're probably very underweight. Then they move on to talking about hamster behavior. And this first sentence is, great. I agree with it. They go, hamsters are nocturnal animals, sleeping during the day. They do not like sunlight or any bright light. But then they follow it up with, however, if you want to play with your hamster during the day, it'll not object if you waken it gently. I mean, no. Your hamster likely is not going to be happy about you waking them up in the middle of their sleep, just like you probably also don't like being awoken in the middle of your sleep. And oftentimes, if you're going to wake them up, you're likely to get a nip because they're not going to be too happy. Then they go on to mention something that is definitely a weird one. They go, hamsters hibernate, especially if the air is both moist and cold. If you keep your pet in a cage out of doors, which I'm thinking they mean outside, provide a draft-free sleeping area, which it can arrange to suit itself during its period of hibernation. There's a possibility that the lifespan of the hamster is connected with the amount of hibernation. A hamster that hibernates 2 months a year may live longer than the 1,000 days usually allotted. For one, hamsters are not like true hibernators. They go through something called torpor, and in captivity, if your hamster is going through torpor and they are not like immediately found and properly warmed up again, they literally are going to die. That is the complete opposite of extending your hamster's life. Next, they move on to housing, and this one is really funny. They go, in general, buy, don't build. The thrill of personal accomplishment is wonderful indeed, but unfortunately, anything you can build can be bought for less, and it might very well be better. I don't know if the prices back in the 80s were just like more, but I highly doubt that. Inflation is crazy now. But all of my cages that I've built have been bigger and cheaper than some of the tiny enclosures sold at the pet store. Along with the cages, they talk about, remember, there must be an access for water, which is true. A water dish will not work, as your hamster will quickly and deliberately fill it with bedding or feces. I mean, if you're not properly set up a water dish, then yes, it's gonna get full of bedding. But I've had how many hamsters now with water dishes, and filling it with bedding and poop is like a very not common occurrence for me. It also goes on to talk about how hamsters are desert animals and that they would drink drops of dew hanging off of plants, and that is their way of life. So don't try to change them, which I think is very ironic at the fact that they say don't try to change them, but they're like, you know what, you can wake them up during the day. They also talk about how hamsters are pretty good escape artists and that the cover might well provide ventilation. If the cover is coarsely screened, it will also be attractive to the hamster for exercise. The hamster will climb about upside down for hours every night. The wire will also get its share of gnawing, which is nothing more than teeth sharpening and release of nervous tension. So as you can see, that type of myth has literally been around for so long. They actually show a picture of a hamster hanging off the mesh. Moving on to bedding, I actually agree with them on this. They say the urine is the problem since the droppings tend to dry out quickly and dry droppings are virtually odorless, which is very much true. If you're spot cleaning your hamster's enclosure and you're like, oh my gosh, there's poop everywhere. Well, yes, hamsters are going to poop everywhere. They don't have control of where they poop. But it's not a huge concern. Hamsters actually use their poop for like navigating their enclosure because it's got their scent on it. And if you don't pick up every single one, it's literally not a big deal. But then of course they have to follow it up with how often should you clean? Once every week or two is good point. Obviously back then, because their cages were so small, they were getting soiled a lot quicker than the cages you see now, because the smaller the area, I feel like I don't even have to explain that. Continuing talking about bedding, they go, bedding can nearly be anything which is not poisonous, overly aromatic, sharp, or entangling. Paper confetti, wood chips, sawdust shavings, mowed hay, chopped hay, cotton waste have all been used successfully. And then, of course, they say, 2 heaping handfuls provide a 2-week supply for an adult and several youngsters together in a cage. 2 heaping handfuls. Like, that 2 weeks? Next, they talk about escapes and captures with hamsters. The hamster spends a great deal of his time plotting and figuring out ways to escape. He gnaws, digs, scratches, pushes, and gnaws some more, and he waits, but at least once he will find his way out, and that's that. Hamsters are very good escape artists, and sometimes even the biggest of cages, a hamster is still going to want to escape. But if your hamster is always trying to escape their enclosure, you do need to look at things that you could possibly improve in the cage to prevent them from doing that. You may need more enrichment, your enclosure might be too small, or you might just need to be offering them more playtime outside of the enclosure. Moving on to the feeding section, I don't know why, but they have an image of a gerbil and a Syrian hamster together, and it goes, a gerbil and a hamster may or may not tolerate each other. 2 species of rodents are best kept apart. So then why are they together? Why did you feel the need to put this picture in there? So I'm actually pretty surprised and impressed by what they recommend for like the diet, except for one thing. They go, the best diet for hamsters is a varied one. Although sunflower seeds seem to be their passionate favorite, the diet should contain fresh raw greens, seeds, nuts. Here's the questionable one, milk. I mean, unless they are under 3 weeks of age, like milk is nope. Fresh raw fruits, meats, vegetable roots and tubers, insects, eggs, and a preferred pelleted food, which is a controversial thing. If you want to feed pellets, feed pellets. If you don't, don't. But I'm actually just really shocked at the fact that they mention hamsters eating insects and other protein foods, because a lot of people still believe that hamsters are herbivores when they're in fact omnivores. So that actually really surprised me. They also touch on hamster diseases, and the thing that they say is basic number one is that hamsters are naturally hardy and naturally resistant to disease. I don't really like the word hardy because it's like talking about an animal as if like, yeah, they can withstand all this abuse. So like, you know, it's fine. They won't die, which that's horrible. I don't like the word hardy. They go ahead and talk about some different hamster diseases, and one of them is an intestinal infection. And they say control and cure require that you destroy all sick animals. Yeah, you heard that right.
Destroy.
No, it's not being cruel. You're saving the infected hamster from an otherwise lingering, miserable death, and you're protecting the other hamsters from contracting the disease. I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say that probably exotic vets were not really as common in the 80s, but I feel like there probably still was solutions to solving intestinal infections. And you don't have to just kill them because it's definitely a treatable thing. I also found this funny. They go to say skin parasites are not common on pet hamsters. I would have to disagree, because if you own hamsters long term, you're likely gonna come across hair loss, which usually is caused by parasites, at least once in your lifetime. That is basically this book. There is definitely a lot of interesting myths in here. This is why I'm not really a huge fan on books for pet care, because they become outdated really, really quickly, and they'll still be in circulation. Like if you have a blog or website or YouTube, you can just delete things once they become outdated, or change them or leave notes, or, you know, a book, like what are you gonna do? This is already in circulation. People own this, they're gonna read it. You can't just be like, yeah, hey, I need you guys to all throw those books away, they're outdated. So that is it for this video. If you guys really enjoyed this one, I have picked up 2 other older hamster care books that I'd love to read through with you guys. So if enough people want me to do that, let me know down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!